maybe we'll start with introductions.
Sure. So I'm Andrew Dorso. I'm an associate professor of wildlife biology at Florida Gulf Coast University in Fort Myers. And I have taught my general ecology class using DataClassroom for the past few semesters.
Hi, I'm Jess Manson. I am an associate professor at the University of Virginia in the Department of Biology, and I use DataClassroom for my large enrollment intro biology course on organismal and evolutionary biology.
And I'm Lauren Sullivan. I'm an assistant professor at Michigan State and in the plant biology department, and I use DataClassroom in my large lecture, although not as large as Jess's lecture, ecology classroom as well.
And I'm Aaron Reedy, the co-founder and CEO of DataClassroom. And I started building DataClassroom as a graduate student and grew the company through my time as an NSF postdoc, and now it is my full-time job. So we'll start with Jess. I'll ask you this question, and then the others, please feel free to jump in and give us your take on it as well. But how did your teaching experience with DataClassroom U compared to other tools that you had used for working with data in a course setting?
Yeah, so I started increasing the amount of data consideration, data literacy, data use in my intro bio class during the pandemic. I decided to make a shift away from more traditional organismal, all of the organisms, to working more with data sets and bringing up data literacy in the class. And that started with Excel because it was an easy tool that was accessible to me and my students. The challenge was that doing even basic statistics in Excel was largely black box for our students, and they couldn't see the process. They would basically be instructed on a series of steps to take, and then they would get a value at the end, but there was very little familiarity with what was happening. So we shifted over to we shifted over to DataClassroom and about 3 or 4 years ago now to help allow students to sort of visualize the process of working through data. And I have been really happy with that shift. It's allowed me to bring in a lot more data-focused exercises and to actually help students consider why we do what we do with data, not just what we get at the end of an analysis.
And Lauren, how about you? What other tools did you use, and what were the experiences like as compared to using DataClassroom?
Yeah, great question. I think similarly to Jess, I was really excited about doing a lot more data literacy in my class. And when I originally taught ecology, my first job at University of Missouri, we had a sort of lecture lab combo. And so I could teach about a concept in lecture, and then in lab, we could collect data. It was a small enough groups, right? Small enough class, 24 students in a lab. So then we could actually use the data, put it in Excel, then analyze everything in R. And it was small enough and we had enough time that we could troubleshoot everyone's code and get R running for everyone. And then when I moved to Michigan State, I was just teaching the lecture, but I wanted to maintain that sort of helping students learn how to use data and increase data literacy in ecology setting. What does an ecologist actually do, right? We analyze data. And so Jess actually told me about DataClassroom because I was like, how am I going to troubleshoot code for 200 students? There's no way I can do that. I can't help them figure out how to where are their files stored? What version of this do you have? And so it was just impossible to do it. And so DataClassroom actually really made it really awesome. Like, we could basically do exactly what we're doing in R, but in a really user-friendly way across a bunch of students. And so I found it very powerful for that. And I can teach students what data look like, how you collect it, and then put it into the system, what the data sets look like, and how to interpret graphs in a much simpler way with that many students.
Cool. Andrew, how about you?
Yeah, so my general ecology class, it sounds like it's similar to the class that you were initially teaching, Lauren, back in Missouri. I usually have between 30 and maybe max 35 students. So 24 sounds great because that would be a little bit easier in terms of the troubleshooting. But I initially had them do we also have combined lecture labs. So it's like a 2.5-hour period when we do very similar lecture about something and then collect data on it and do some analysis. And I started out trying to have them do everything that they could in R, because, you know, it's coming straight in from a postdoc, and I was thinking, well, this is what people are really using in the field. So, you know, this is what they should be learning how to use. And I struggled with that because, of course, as you say, they need a lot of backup on, really, it's not so much the coding, but the things that you mentioned, knowing how to find where things are in their file system, and, you know, what to do when a message pops up that says they need to, you know, update something. Don't just cancel it and then assume it's going to work, right? And I had a lot of students that came back to me a semester or two later and said, I'm really glad you made us do this because it's so useful for what I end up doing. But I also got a lot of student evaluations saying that, like, it was too hard, it was impossible, you know. And so now what I have is all of my labs are implemented in R, in Excel, and in DataClassroom, and I let them choose which one they're going to use. I try to encourage them to try at least one lab in each of the 3 different pieces of software throughout the semester and see which one they like better. And I don't know if I have quite enough data on that to say which one is the winner. I could try to look it up while we're on the call. I think I might have some preliminary. But yeah, similar arc.
Cool. And maybe we'll start out with Lauren on this question, but I'm interested to hear what each of you think your students get out of using DataClassroom U, and really thinking about, like, what do you think they take away from that experience that they can use again in future coursework?
I think one thing that I heard several times is that the program is easy enough that a lot of that computer anxiety and math anxiety, you can sort of remove that. So then the students can actually work with the data and understand the concepts in our course in a way that is not so scary. Like, I would come up to students when, you know, they would be working on their activities in their groups, and I'd come up to them and I'd ask them, you know, how's it going? They're like, well, I know I'm like Gen Z, but I'm not a computer person. Like, I've heard that so many times, and I was like, actually, no one's a computer person. You have to learn how to be a computer person. And I think this program, you know, it's like once they saw that it was the same thing over and over, they found it to be really straightforward. And actually, many of them are like, have emailed me also and been like, oh, I use this in the classes after because I had a whole year of a subscription. So I've used this in my other classes. And that like made me really happy because then, you know, it's like being used across different classrooms. So I think that that's sort of how I would answer that question.
I've been waiting to hear that from one of mine, and I haven't yet.
Well,
But
you need 200, so then
yeah,
you'll hear it.
that definitely helps. I need to get my colleagues doing more rigorous quantitative stuff too. I think that's probably part of it.
Yeah.
Andrew, do you want to jump in on this one first?
Sure, I can. I mean, again, very similar. I totally agree, Lauren. I hear so many of my students say, I like literally exactly how you said it. I know I'm Gen Z, but I'm not a computer person. Like, one said that to me just this week.
Yep.
Yeah, you know, I think there are certain students who are still just kind of treating it like a video game and just trying to like click whatever they can and try to get it done as quickly as possible. But in general, I totally agree. It removes, because you're really trying to do 3 different things when you're doing some sort of data analysis in R, right? You've got like the coding piece, so the actual like almost linguistics part of writing and troubleshooting and debugging the code. Then you've got the statistics piece about like probabilities and mathematics. And then you've got whatever the actual subject of the data are, whether that's ecological or anything else. And so I think what DataClassroom does is it kind of removes that first piece, which for many is the highest hurdle, and allows the students to focus a little bit more on the other 2 and the interplay between them.
I would totally agree with that. So I'm teaching intro bio students. Many of them this is their first time really getting into data, and I'm teaching 800 of them. So we have to have a tool that's easy to access across lots of different ability levels. And so we start really slow, like the first few exercises, and these are both mostly in lab right now, but we're shifting towards more lecture-based exercises as well. It's stepwise. point and click on this button, this will happen, point and click on this button. But we work towards exercises later in the semester where we say, you know how to do these things now, and you've collected data on 10 variables. Which buttons are you going to click? Which variables are you going to select? How are you going to plot that data? And so one thing that I think would be very challenging to do in another type of program where the coding piece is so critical, like whether it's in R or the black box of Excel, is giving them that opportunity to build and then have them feel comfortable with the choose your own adventure type of exercises. So it really always makes me happy. And I think that maybe we even give them too much help. By the time they get there, like, this is old hat, watch me do this, which is fabulous. What do they take away for future courses? One thing I have not done yet, but I'm getting inspired by you two. We have a lot of students will actually ask me, I know I'm going to have to do things in R, and we have not been taking full advantage of Bridge to R, but that's in the future for us. So starting to build in exercises where they can shift to an R code or see their R code. And I think for our students, that's going to be a huge thing for them to bring forward. I will just quickly anecdotally say that my graduate TAs love having access to DataClassroom. They often will use it as their first pass on doing statistics and often come and tell me, I'm so glad, we're teaching with this software. It makes my life so much easier. This is how I visualize my data. So I think that it's cool that, we're using it as a tool in, either introductory or intermediate courses. And our grad students are like, I wish this existed when I was taking these courses. So that's kind of neat.
That's very, very cool to hear. This is just another question, and anyone who feels inspired to answer this first can go ahead, but just, when you think about using DataClassroom U, what has the tool allowed you to do differently in your course? If you had to kind of pinpoint of like, what has it allowed you to change or do in a different and better way?
I have an answer for that one. Okay, so what I think it's allowed me to do is really give the students control over their own learning in some ways. So we don't do this for all students, but I'm considering doing it next year. 200 students was very overwhelming the first time. So like we just did this with honor students, but basically every week we would do these labs where we went through, here's a data set that relates to the concept and let's graph it and analyze it and talk through it. So then what it allowed them to do for their final projects for their honor students is they then collected they found their own data from the literature and had to recreate the figures that they found. And I thought they were going to be coming to me and asking me for so much help, but they figured it out really well and came up with some really amazing projects. And so what it's allowed my students to do or me to do in my classroom that I would have anticipated is to be able to actually, analyze their own data. I can think of a million things I could do with this now that I see how well they can do it themselves once they have some practice. And so, in R, it would have been a lot trickier. But troubleshooting the data, cleaning the data, that's so easy in DataClassroom. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities for students to do their own projects with their own data, to ask their own questions that I wouldn't have had before.
Very cool.
Yeah, one thing that I had never thought of doing. So I brought DataClassroom into our class almost intending to use it exclusively in lab. This is our lab software. This is what we're going to do. It's lab. You collect data in lab. And what we're starting to do, and what I'm really excited to expand, is doing data analysis in lecture with 400 students at a time. Because with visualization software, you can do that. You can give students prompts for a short exercise. They can work in pairs. They can pull up the software they already have, and they can start playing with data and answering questions interactively, even in a large lecture hall. You provide reflective questions and they can answer them. And so it's helping us bring even more active learning into the classroom. And it's a direction, right now we're still in the early stages, but it's a direction we're shifting the course in. And 3 or 4 years ago, I would have never imagined that was something I was going to do in my large enrollment class. I would have said, no way, we're going to stick to the rules of like simple stuff, but we're able to do much more applied question asking and much more critical thinking during a lecture period by having them pull this up, having them work through problems together. It's really cool.
Y'all are really inspiring me. I haven't used it that much in class, if I'm being honest. I mostly have them use it you know, for their homework or for their take-home lab assignments. But I love the idea of doing it a little bit more live during lecture. And I especially love, I'm going to steal your idea, Lauren, of having them recreate a figure from the literature. That's brilliant. I guess the other thing I would say is, you know, it has definitely it has freed up my time to make other elements of the class better because I'm spending less time helping them troubleshoot the same basic things over and over again. And honestly, I think it really helped improve my own understanding of some of the statistical tests that we use all the time. Like honestly, the seesaw visualization with the t-test is brilliant. I'm teaching biological statistics class for grad students right now, and I didn't make them subscribe to DataClassroom. Sorry, Aaron, because I wanted them to really learn how to do it all in R. But I'm gonna show them DataClassroom next week, and because we're doing the t-test next week, and I'm gonna show them that seesaw because it's just nothing better.
It is pretty powerful, and I would say I've definitely learned a lot, particularly if you've played with the linear regression interactive analysis. I had no idea how the math worked in linear regression until we built that. So it's yeah, there's something to be learned by explaining stuff explicitly.
Absolutely. Yeah, in a couple weeks I'm going to be leaning on that for sure.
All right, and I guess another question for you all, and this is kind of my final question, is based on your experience with DataClassroom U, you know, what are the kinds of teaching and learning situations where you would recommend the use of this tool?
I'll jump in quickly. So I think one of the things that surprises me surprised me, it no longer surprises me, is I originally saw this as a lab tool and I was going to keep it exclusively in lab. And the fact that we can use it in lecture, I think is really awesome, even in a large enrollment class. I am seeing it as an opportunity for students, similar to what Lauren was talking about, to really dive into how do we build a figure, and to think a lot more about the underlying data. I think that historically we've done a good job in intro courses and in upper division courses of showing students data, saying what's going on in data, but that doesn't always help with the broader conceptual elements of understanding data about things like distributions, right? Interactions, things like that. And so we are trying to lean heavily on the fact that we can very quickly build figures because the software is so easy to access, to kind of demonstrate some first principles. And I think to help make connections. Lauren said earlier, you know, as ecologists, what we do is play with data. I don't think students always know that early on. They sort of think, oh, you're a biologist. You know, you look at cool organisms, you go to neat ecosystems. This is not so quantitative, right? If I wanted quantitative, I'd go to another STEM discipline. And so being able to really highlight the quantitative nature, but in an accessible way, so we don't, you know, have students who are sort of unsure, feel that they are, they can't be part of it, that they aren't, it's not part of their skill set, to try and help them see that you can absolutely do quantitative work. You don't have to be a coding genius or have tons of experience with statistics. We can show you how to build in some of these ideas. So I think it can help with really foundational idea building. That's not a concrete example, but it can help with that sort of foundational work, and just hopefully also getting them to enjoy the process of working with data. I think one of the hurdles, as powerful as R is, and as much as I love it, it can be both frustrating and intimidating. And with a software package that kind of bridges that, it's much easier for you to just play around, right? Use the heart emojis if you want, or change the color of the data, whatever. So, and do it quickly so that it's not like I had to build this whole new figure, right? I think that changes hopefully how students feel about working with data.
I don't think I could put it better than that. But I fully agree. You know, I was racking my brain for a concrete example here. So truth be told, I'm actually not teaching the course this semester. So I'm several months removed from my best concrete examples, and I didn't do the best job prepping, but But I think something I want to try a little bit more in the future is a learning situation where you give students data that are kind of messy and have them use DataClassroom U to clean it up. Mostly I've been giving them fairly sanitized data sets so far. And now that I'm teaching this biostatistics class for the first time, I'm not doing that anymore. And we're going through the whole process of, how do I import it and clean it in R? And that's valuable at the graduate level for someone to learn, but I think at the undergraduate level, it's probably like starting with that is a bit too much unless the entire class is focused on data analysis. And so I guess as a real general statement, the teaching and learning situations where I would recommend DataClassroom U is be any class that isn't explicitly focused on data analysis that, which you wish to make more quantitative. And I feel like in STEM that could be practically anything.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, and I think sort of bridging what both of you are saying, it's just a great way to be able to do more sort of cure type work, right? Like undergraduate research experiences in the classroom. And I also have typically thought that to be a lab type thing, but I don't teach a lab class. And how can you teach ecology without a lab? Like there is a lab, I don't teach it. And so I'm just giving this lecture and I actually personally feel very uncomfortable just lecturing. I feel like I'm on stage. I like dislike it. I like the sort of impromptu nature of what questions people are going to ask and where the discussions go about the data and the concepts. I actually really love that. And so I just think it's a really powerful tool for, cures or anything like that where you can get it in there. And a lot of times, there's so much data that's unexplored in the activities we do. And so then, like you were saying, Jess, we sort of let them, okay, what's something that you're excited about that you want to explore in this data? What's a relationship you could test? And then they make cool graphs and they have chicks as the point sometimes or whatever. And I always get those and I laugh, but that's so important for helping students look at things that are of interest to them. And so, it provides this tool that's not scary, that they can ask their own questions of their own interest. So I love that.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for making time to do this conversation. I know our whole team finds it incredibly inspiring to hear about what you all are doing with our tools. So that's fantastic. And yeah, it's been a pleasure to talk with you, and I hope we continue to work together for a long time to come. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.
Good to see you all.
Yeah, good to see you.